Geez, this is actually harder than I thought it would be. I mean, where do you even begin? It's always been easier for me to tell someone else's story than my own. I guess that's why I ended up being a journalist. Deciding which bits stay and which bits go is never easy. Edit, edit some more. Seek the truth. All in the hope of helping my fellow humans understand and engage the world around them. A mission that has shaped my entire life. But I have sat down at least 5 times to write this episode, and each time I have deleted more words than I have written. Because although it's my job to do it for others, editing my own life has proved to be a lot tougher. So instead of trying to find a neat, tidy beginning, middle and end, I reminded myself that real life never mirrors the glossiness of our favourite Hollywood movies. So the words that follow are from a script that was never meant to be written, and only fell to the page after, to my surprise, several requests from others to know more about my own storybook. What we present to the world is often the titles, the academic achievements, the clues that might indicate to another that we are successful. But these are merely facts that tell you very little about the core of a human. It's only by having the courage to be vulnerable that we can ever truly make meaningful connections and contributions. I guess it's why I chose to reside in the shadows for the first half of my life. It felt safer there. But as the years have passed, I have found immense comfort in listening to those who have been brave enough to leave their comfort zone and share the darkest parts of themselves so freely with another. Because if anything, being a journalist has taught me the stories and voices that aren't shared do nothing to diminish the tagline, "You are not alone." If you don't hear stories, then you feel alone. So here is my edited version of a life that today I am truly blessed to be living, and one that only a few years ago I didn't think I would. And I say edited not because I'm only sharing with you a shiny Instagram version, but because this is not meant to be a memoir, at least not yet. I'm not entirely sure when I began to dislike myself. Is it something any of us ever consciously choose to do? Maybe it was the subtle yet blatant bullying I experienced throughout my school life. Maybe it was when I would wait until the last minute to leave home just so that I didn't have to notice the fact that I had no one to wait with at the bus stop. Maybe it was when I realised that none of the boys at college ever asked me out. Maybe it was the confusion I felt around my parents' divorce and wondering where I belonged. I could go on, but I am fiercely conscious that in the world we inhabit today, none of these events are particularly unusual. All I do know is that younger Laura was a pretty sad and lonely person. Not particularly academic, I was what you would call average, vanilla, unremarkable. It suited me, enabled me to blend into the background and go unnoticed. So instead I directed my attention to my body, pulling it apart, scrutinising it, wishing, longing for it to be different. It proved a successful distraction from the sadness I felt inside, a sadness that in just one night was replaced by a darkness that permeated everything I knew and loved. I will never forget the look on my stepbrother's face the night he unexpectedly turned up to collect me from a friend's in the early hours. The short drive home was a complete blur, interrupted only by the neon flashing lights that lit up the entire driveway. And as I opened the front door, nothing could drown out the hysterical sobbing that radiated from every room. This was the night my life changed, the catalyst that would shape my storyline to come. The what ifs, why didn't I wish I had of, haunted me in my sleep and every moment I wasn't. Michael, my stepfather, saved my mum, my sister and I from a future that could have been a whole lot bleaker, and all the words that I wished I'd said began to eat away at me, literally. Because somewhere in my psyche, I decided that if I couldn't tell Michael the words I so wanted him to hear, that if I couldn't tell him how much I loved him or how sorry I was for being a teenage brat on our last holiday, then I would show him by punishing myself. And with that, I slowly but surely became hostage to a self-imposed regime of brutal penance. Not even the sunny shores of Australia and the adventure of a gap year could rescue me, because no matter where you are always with yourself. What followed were 2 decades of battling not only the dictator that had taken up home in my head and my body, but also the mental health system that deemed me not sick enough to need help. It was a toll that weighed heavily on myself and those around me. On the outside, I appeared to be a successful human. I got a master's in broadcasting and I made it to the BBC, a place that to this day I am incredibly proud of saying. But that's the thing about the outside. It's rarely an accurate reflection of what's going on the inside. Frightened and hopeless, I didn't know where to turn. Decades of battling yourself is exhausting. Robbie Williams summed up how I felt so perfectly in one line from the song Feel. I don't want to die, but I ain't keen on living either. Whilst my friends were busy going on dates and building their careers, I retreated further and further into my prison, a place that was cold, dark, and lonely. So when one day I was given another self-help book, I wanted to scream. Yet something made me open it, and as I read the first 3 pages, I burst into tears. Tears because for the first time, someone spoke my language. Their story gave me hope that maybe, just maybe, I could stop hating myself just enough to keep fighting. That fight took me to the other side of the world, this time not to escape but to go head on first into the battle zone. I was lucky, and only by the sheer generosity of a stranger and some huge family sacrifices was I able to get on a flight to the US where I would spend the next 8 months learning to live with Laura. This is an entire chapter in itself, but what it taught me was that stories can save lives. I spent 8 months listening and watching people with similar versions who had gone on to live another way. Stories that helped me to look at myself through a completely different lens. Stories from those who didn't judge or question or berate me. The kind of people who can see into your soul, into all the cracks where your demons hide, and still love you and want you to win. It was these people and these stories that carried me through the most physically, emotionally, and mentally uncomfortable time of my life. Each day a little further to my truth and a little more healed. Healed in the places and spaces that I didn't even know needed to be healed. Returning home to the newsroom and to a life that I couldn't wait to lead was harder than I imagined. I found my tribe in California. I felt seen, heard, and although I was stripped to the bone, literally, there I didn't feel naked. Much like a child leaving its mother's womb, I missed the warmth and safety of the staff and the friends I had made. London, in comparison, felt harsh, unforgiving, and cold. I remember the day I walked back into the newsroom. It was as though time had stood still. The same people, bar 1 or 2, were still frantically running around chasing the next lead and crafting the next headline. I met old and new faces at the tea bar, water cooler, and in the canteen. Each one I could tell a little unsure as to what to say or ask. Either that or my absence had gone completely unnoticed. Afraid and ashamed, I offered little explanation as to where I'd been or why. My eating disorder continued to be the elephant in the room, the dirty secret, the perfect excuse to remain on the sidelines. So when one day an email landed in my inbox from a senior editor asking me to tell my story as part of an internal mental health campaign, I knew that this was my chance to do what I had always encouraged others to do, tell my story in my own words. It wasn't a decision I made lightly. Opening up to my friends and family had been hard enough, but sharing my demons with my colleagues was something else. Would I be judged, excluded, isolated, deemed weak? Would my career that I'd fought so hard to build be jeopardized? But with the support of an incredible boss and 6 of my colleagues who also made the brave decision to share about their own mental health challenges, I agreed, and together we launched an internal campaign to encourage others to open up about their experiences. The morning my video went live on the internet, I was full of fear. But within a matter of hours, my inbox began to fill up with messages of thanks, some from those I knew, but many from whom I had never met before, from employees all across the BBC and all across the world. And as I read every word and every story, I realized that I was not alone, and that there were people all around me in this organization who had or were going through something similar. Again, I was reminded of the power of sharing real-life stories, and I went on to help redefine the narrative of mental health in the BBC, a campaign that I'm pleased and proud to say still continues to run. Because that's the thing, the currency of storytelling can never run dry. Workplaces are intrinsic to our world, and is why I'm so passionate about helping other organizations utilize the magic of first-person storytelling. In the days, months, and years that passed, I slotted back into the whirlwind of city life. My worries about losing my job or being sidelined never came to fruition, and with no elephant in the room, I actually began to shine in a way that I had never done before. The newsroom and my job offered me a place that I could eat, breathe, and sleep stories, and I made it my goal to use my privilege as a journalist to offer a voice to those struggling to be seen and heard. Those who, like me, were too scared to leave the sidelines, even when they wanted to. I loved my job, and it made living in the city bearable. That and a wonderful group of ladies who shared my love for horses. Horses have always been the one constant in my life, and no matter where my storybook has taken me, they have always offered me a place of solace. I also found love with someone who for the next 6 years became a central character in my storybook, and for someone who at times questioned if they were ever lovable. There was a chapter that will always be one of my most cherished. But just like so many others who were forced to reevaluate their lives a few years ago when the pandemic hit, our chapter came to an end. An ending that broke my heart into a billion pieces and turned my world upside down. But it is also an ending that became a beginning, and one that has brought me to you and you to me. In fact, everyone I meet and share a conversation with today is because of a decision that at the time I wouldn't have chosen to make, but a decision that has led me to my most treasured chapter yet. In the space of just 3 weeks, I was faced with a choice: return to what I knew or step out into the unknown. And although the pain in my heart felt physically unbearable, I knew that it was temporary. At least that's what I was told. Desperate to hold on to any glimmer of hope, I spent the days and nights listening to the soothing voice of Eckhart Tolle as I walked amongst the rolling hills of the English countryside. Surrounded by the wide open spaces, the heavy fog slowly began to lift. I had, of course, been in darker places before, when Michael died and when I entered the treatment centre in the US. But then all I had was the cruel, punishing voice of my eating disorder for company. This time, as I slowly pieced my heart back together and rebuilt my life, gratitude and nature were my loyal companions. Every negative, critical and punishing voice that entered my mind, I let it in and took it to the pages of my journal. I made the conscious decision to lean into my intrinsic curiosity and look for the message, the lesson, or teaching. I kept flipping the script until a kinder one became my new normal. And in doing so, I found myself showing up in the present moment. I became an active participant in the here and now. Not a ghost of the past or some unknown of the future. It was new, but it felt good. I kept on doing it. I became a consistent, curious participant in this Ingold life. I welcomed the dark as much as I did the light, and in doing so grew more and more at peace with the impermanence of life. And once I truly accepted that people, places, and things can never be held onto, my life began to fill up with every step I took. I viewed the world through a fresh lens, and instead of looking at what I had lost, I discovered that I had gained more treasures than I had ever imagined possible. Treasures found in the faces, voices, and stories of those who so generously gave me their time, their home, their love, their support. Strangers who have now become family. It was these kind souls and their unwavering belief in me that led me to creating Flip It. With decades worth of journals, I drew on them as inspiration to explore our shared humanity. What more could I learn from others who had walked a similar path? I took myself back into the newsroom and reminded myself of the incredible humans that entrusted me with their story. Those who didn't have a platform but nonetheless deserved to be heard. The heroes that surround us every day. To do this, I knew I had to dig deep and use my own voice. I had to flip the microphone and camera around and sit myself down in the hot seat. I deliberated for several months. I convinced myself that I didn't have the budget or resources needed to make anything worth listening to. I told myself that having worked alongside some of the best in the business, I was stupid to think that I could be any good at playing host. And then I gave myself an almighty big talking to. I realised that this voice sounded familiar. It was the critical, punishing, egotistical voice that had haunted me for so much of my life. It was a voice that I never wanted to hear again. So instead, I rewrote my narrative and did something that would make my younger self proud. I became vulnerable and committed to doing it, without any expectation of the outcome. I told myself that at worst I would learn something new, and at best I might just offer someone else an alternative lens in which to view their life. I wanted to do what others had done for me, because when you are gifted with another person's story, you're also gifted with another version of your own. One that might just be lighter and brighter than the one you are facing right now. And so 12 months later, here I am, someone who radiates with a glow so warm that even the harshest of winters could never turn cold. A richer human that no amount of money could have ever made me. Rich from the people who have come into my life, all because one door closed, a door that led me to creating Flip It. In fact, everything that came before this very day has brought me here into creating Flip It. The Laura who spent more than 2 decades of torturing her body. The Laura who didn't know how to process the grief and guilt that arose from Michael's death. The Laura who finally opened up to her colleagues in the newsroom. And the Laura whose heart was once broken. And although at the time I wished that none of this would have happened, I now know that the losses were also in many ways just part of what it means to be a human in this world. Because the simple truth is that inside our hearts and minds, we all face similar challenges. The more we understand and believe this, the more we walk this earth and meet one another with a greater sense of compassion. And the most valuable and accessible tool that we all have to do this is our own stories. Sharing stories is etched into our very being. They are fundamental to our survival, and we tell them every day. Every joy, every disappointment, every win, and every loss is what makes you so beautifully you. My life has been mapped by stories. At home, at school, at work, in my community. Stories save lives. They have and continue to save my life. The connection that is ignited from hearing someone share their memories and life experiences is beyond powerful. You don't have to make the headlines to be worthy of telling yours. And in fact, we are never just one story. We are a collection, a tapestry, a multitude of chapters that end and begin just like the seasons, each one a gift to another. So don't be sparing with the ones you'd rather didn't happen. These are the ones that are pure gold. Use your pain to become a stronger, kinder, more compassionate person to yourself and to others. You need never get stuck on the same old page, and you need never cast yourself as the villain. You hold the pen and you are the author. Don't get trapped by the small stories, and don't let your past define your present and limit your future. This life can be messy and harsh at times, but I fundamentally believe that there is more good in this world than there isn't. You just have to pay attention and listen, and you have to get off the sidelines. My story and the story of Flip It is only beginning, and I'm so grateful to each and every person who has entrusted me with theirs. Each one of you has helped me to feel seen, understood, and not alone. And isn't that what we're all looking for? So although this episode wasn't planned and has taken me a whole lot longer to write, I hope that you may have heard something in my own story that helps you know that whatever difficulty you might be going through right now, it will not feel the same tomorrow as it does today. Just like a storm, everything is temporary and everything passes. The sun will rise again. All you have is the here and now and the opportunity to see something differently. But above all, my biggest wish for you is to know that your voice and your story deserves to be heard, no matter what. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Flip It, and if you did, I would be hugely grateful if you could rate, review, and subscribe, because together we can discover and share more stories and voices that deserve to be heard.